On this episode of Locked On Angels, it's Fanmail Friday, and you asked, what's a viable path to the playoffs for the Halos? Is it the wild card? Is it winning the West? We're going to tell you what it would take to do both of those and if the Angels even have a chance. And don't say no until we talk about it. It's time to get locked on with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Dodger fans will be in the comments. Nonsense! Ridiculous! Get out of here. Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SiriusXM by searching Locked On Angels. And if you'd like to get back to the Super Halo Bros for all the Super Halo content, here's some things that you can do. Leave us a rate and a review on Apple Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe and become a Locked On everydayer. And whether you're watching or listening, come over to YouTube and leave a comment. It's one of the best ways to get in touch with us and be a part of the conversation. And this episode of Locked On Angels is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if their first $5 bet wins. Just download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started.
Thanks for being here for this episode of Fanmail Friday, Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
It's our fourth season here as the hosts of Locked On Angels. We're here talking Angels baseball every day, Monday through Friday, every single weekday, of course, however you want to slice it. We're here for you 5 days a week. On today's show, it's a Fanmail Friday. We're excited to get into your questions. Now, if you're looking for results from yesterday's game, it was a night game between the Mariners and the Angels. We'll have that covered for you on Monday, as well as all the weekend games as well. But it is a Fanmail Friday, one of our favorite days of the week, because we get to hear from you. And in fact, Mike, we've got a great voicemail from Neil in Sacramento. Here we go.
Hey, Mike. Hey, John. Hope you guys are doing well. Ready for another season here, regardless of how it goes. Question for John in particular, but for Mike too, it could probably just be like the opposite of what I'm about to ask. So, John, considering you predicted the Angels making a wild card spot, who do you see us beating out, not only in our division, but the American League as a whole for that wild card spot? It feels like a lot of teams in the AL got a little bit better, or they're coming off injuries. So I'm curious to see who you think we're going to finish ahead of. Thanks so much, guys. Bye-bye.
Neil in Sacramento, thank you for your voicemail, my friend. Mike, what if it's Neil Diamond? What if it's Neil Armstrong? Gotta get my Seinfeld reference.
What if it's Neil Itzen?
Yeah. Hey, there you go. Throwback.
He was my best man at my wedding. Nobody knows that reference except for you and I.
That's right. That's right. Hey, listen. So what's the path to the playoffs for the Angels? We're going to take segments 1 and 2 to talk about that.
Yeah.
And we're going to start with a path to the wild card, Mike. So let's take a look at how things ended up in the American League last year. Take us through the division winners and then the wild card winners.
Yeah, the division winners last year were the Yankees, Guardians, and Astros. The Yankees had the best record in the American League, 94 wins. Guardians had 92 wins, and the Astros had 88 wins. And then the wild card winners last year were the Orioles, the Tigers, and the Royals. The Orioles had 91 wins. The Tigers and the Royals each had 86 wins. Since they've introduced that third wild card spot, John, 2022, the lowest win total for the third team was the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Miami Marlins. Each had 84 wins in 2023. But the most common win total since 2022 has been 86 wins. So the question, I guess, would be, is that going to be enough to get that third wild card spot?
Yeah, it seems like the floor for a wild card spot at the minimum is 86. But Mike, I think it might be more difficult in 2025, and here's why. Let's talk about the path to the wild card. The Red Sox were 81 and 81 last year, but they got a whole lot better this year. They got Garrett Crochet, Alex Bregman, Walker Buehler, Aroldis Chapman in the bullpen. They also have 3 top prospects on the way. The Yankees are still going to be at the top of the AL, even though they lost Juan Soto, because they added Max Fried to a rotation that includes Garrett Cole, Luis Gil, who's dealing with some injuries, Carlos Rodon, Clark Schmidt, and Marcus Stroman. Cody Bellinger was added to their outfield. Devin Williams, an elite closer, is now closing for them. And then, Mike, tell me I'm wrong here. Paul Goldschmidt is with them, and he's going to do that thing where a veteran goes to the Yankees and has a career resurgence like Matt Carpenter did, right? He's going to do exactly that with the Yankees, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly that. You're not wrong. You're absolutely right. That's what happens when they put the pinstripes on. Guys who were mediocre for a couple of seasons, maybe had some history. They were really good in the past. For some reason, New York, the bright lights, they end up playing really, really well there. And so watch Paul Goldschmidt have a 30 home run, 100 RBI season for the Yankees, right?
Don't get me wrong. I like Paul Goldschmidt.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, you know, he was MVP 2022.
Yep.
And then he hasn't been Goldschmidt like in the last 2 years. But once he gets to New York, he's going to find
it's
it again.
that right center field, like win slot that he's going to find. And that's where a lot of his home runs are going to go out. And it's going to look like he'll hit 330, right? It'll be an amazing season. That's what happens. It just happens when you put on those pinstripes.
So it's very likely that the Yankees and the Red Sox are going to be battling for first in the AL East, while the other team will take a wild card spot. So if the Yankees get first, then the Red Sox will get that first wild card spot, or vice versa. The Orioles, Mike, took a step back this offseason. They lost Corbin Burns and Anthony Santander, their best pitcher and their best home run hitter. But do they snag a second wild card? It depends on how the AL Central ends up, because both the Royals and the Tigers got better, while the Guardians definitely took a step back. The Central also has the benefit of beating up on the White Sox and picking us up some extra wins as well.
Okay, so all of that, assuming the Yankees, the Red Sox, and the Orioles are taking wins from each other, and that the Royals and the Tigers, both 86-win teams last year, got a little bit better. They're competing for first base. Does that put a minimum amount of wins, not at 86, John, but maybe at 89 for that third wild card spot? What are your thoughts?
I think that is going to be accurate, because Royals and Tigers got better. Even if the Yankees, the Red Sox, and the Orioles are taking wins away from each other, the Yankees and the Red Sox aren't going to, I would say 89 is a minimum for them. Even if they don't get all the wins they could, I think 89 is like that magic number for a wild card spot. And between the Yankees, Sox, the Orioles, the Royals, and the Tigers, they could snag those three spots, and all five of those teams could easily get 89 games. And that's not even mentioning the Rangers, the Astros, and, you know I wrote them off saying they didn't take a step forward, but that's the Guardians as well. So with that said, a path to the wild card first is going to take a path through the AL East and the AL Central. Plus, it's going to take probably 89 wins, don't you think?
Yeah, and thinking about where this team was last year, I get that the last part of the season, September, was really terrible, lots of injuries, but they still ended up with just 63 wins.
Yeah.
So that means, John, quick math, 26 victories in the positive. They need to add 26 wins. And this team right now, we've talked about, like, their lid is probably 500. Now you've given us some good clarity on previous episodes about how they could potentially be a playoff team. But if they're going to get to 89 wins and get that third wild card spot, they're going to have to find 26 wins with this current roster right now. And that's a big ask of any team, right? Now, I know that the Royals did flip the script last year and went from 50 plus wins to 86 wins.
They added 30 wins, exactly 56 to 86 last year. Yeah.
So it's possible, right? But the Royals did do some strategic moves, and they had some of their young players that rose to the challenge, and Bobby Witt Jr., of course, led the way. But John, they're veterans, specifically their catcher. He had a almost resurgent, even though he wasn't a terrible player.
Yeah.
But he was back to the guy that we had seen in previous years. And so for the Halos to get to 89 wins, they're going to have a combination of all of that. Kikuchi's going to have to be excellent, right? Jose Soriano is going to have to be a Michael Wacha type. He's going to have to be somebody that gets to 10, 15 wins, right? And Tyler Anderson's going to have to be a veteran that carries this team. Reed Detmers is going to have to figure it out, right? And so maybe that's the mechanism that shifts things for the Angels. I think they're going to have a lot of hitting from their young guys, but their veteran guys are going to have to really carry the the ball as well. So Mike Trout has got to be in there, 140, 150 games,
Right.
hitting 35, maybe 40 home runs and
Right.
hitting in the high 280s. I think that all of those things are all possible, right? But it feels like, oh, right. As you go through the list.
When you stop to think about it and you think about like, okay, if they're going to make the playoffs, it really depends on how some of these other teams are functioning and operating. And so to Neil's point, he's like, I feel like a lot of teams, especially in the AL West, got better. We're going to dive into that here in a second. But again, you've got to look up and see, all right, who has a real shot at the wild card. And I honestly believe it's the NL East and one team from the Central who are going to clog up those spots. So the Angels are going to have to be competitive with those teams. Not only did they get better, but the Angels are going to have to step up and be better as well. What's interesting to me is I think this conversation opens up the idea that like everybody kind of all the boats rose, Mike. The tide went up and all of the boats have risen. But how much have they risen, I think, is the key point here. And that's something the Angels are going to have to prove. So then again, the path to the wild card is probably an 89 win minimum. So now that we've discussed that, we want to thank you for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. And coming up next, we're going to be talking about a path to winning the AL West. Maybe that's the more viable option. We'll take a look at it the way we took a look at the wild card, and we'll get into that coming right up.
Today's episode of Locked On Angels is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and you can get involved, and there's no better place to get involved than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on all of the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Whether you're backing your favorite team for a late-game rally or you're picking a player to hit a clutch three, go with Luka. He seems to be on it right now. Or maybe anybody with the Cleveland Cavaliers. They're fantastic right now. FanDuel's got you covered, plus the app, very easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
This is the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. We're continuing our Fanmail Friday with questions from you. Now, we're taking Neil's question about the Angels' path to the playoffs and dividing it into two parts. We talked about a path to winning the wild card spot. It feels like 89 wins is probably the minimum that they're going to need to at least get that third wild card spot, given how tough the AL East is and a battle between the Tigers and the Royals for the AL Central. So does that leave a path to the playoffs via the AL West? Mike, let's take a look at the AL West standings from last year.
Yeah, Astros finished first, 88 wins. Mariners finished second, 85 wins. The Rangers had 78 wins. Then the A's with 69 wins. And of course, the Angels finished last year with 63 wins and 99 losses. 99 losses that Logan O'Hoppe said at the O'Hoppe Bowl they were all embarrassed of, and they want to change, which I love that.
Yeah.
Johnny, the Astros lost Alex Bregman, Kyle Tucker, Justin Verlander. We are thanking the good Lord for that, because those guys, maybe two out of those three guys really tore us up.
Right.
We're still waiting on the returns of McCullers, Luis Garcia, and Christian Javier. Of course, they lost Ryan Presley in the bullpen. They did add Isaac Paredes, and that is it. Like that's really kind of the big move. And so do the Astros fall from 88 wins in 2025? What do you think?
That seems kind of likely. I know that they have some arms returning, but it's not going to be for a little while, Mike. And again, Angel killers Alex Bregman and Kyle Tucker are out of the lineup. Now, Isaac Paredes, to be fair, has also been an Angel killer with the Rays in his time. And then the time he was with the Cubs, he tore us up too. So that's going to be a problem for the Angels. But again, I think the Angels could pick up some wins against the Astros. They went 4-9 against them last year. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail, but we're going to give you the standings against each AOS team. Mike, the Rangers added Jock Peterson and Jake Berger. Between the two of them, they hit 52 home runs. So that's going to be a powerful offense in Texas. They got Nate Eovaldi back. They're getting some injury returns. Some guys are coming back from injury. Jacob deGrom, Cody Bradford, Josh Young, Evan Carter. The Rangers, to me, are the team to beat in the AL West. I know that they were in the World Series 2 years ago. They had kind of a hangover last year, but they also dealt with a lot of injuries. And I think that they're the team to beat. They also, the Angels also went 4-9 against them last year.
Mariners, you did this on purpose, didn't you? Mariners didn't improve the offense at all this offseason. In fact, it might have gotten a little worse, John.
Right.
They led the league in strikeouts last year. They still have one of the best rotations in baseball.
If not the best, right?
Right. And there was a lot of chatter from Justin Turner about that as he signed with the Cubs. Is that where he signed?
Yeah.
And he talked about how they were one game out of the playoffs and didn't make a move and should have made a move. And that's neither here nor there for us. But it was
Depoto's going to depote.
Right. Just didn't do it. No offense, I think, means that their ceiling is probably close to their total win from last year. They had 85 wins. Now, let's just be clear about 85 wins. The Angels went 8-5 against this 85 win team last season. So all of the jokes out there, you lost to a 99 loss team. You went 8-5. Okay, so we're excited about that. I'm going to celebrate that a little bit. But they haven't really done much at all this offseason. And
it's a lateral move, Mike. It's like if they won 85 last year, this same team is going to win 85 at the most this year. That's the way I look at it, right?
Right. And that's the only team that the Angels were actually successful against in the AL West last year, because against the A's, they were 5-8. And the A's have improved. They got Jeffrey Springs. They got Luis Severino. Young guys like Lawrence Butler are going to be there again this year. So they're going to jump up from 69 wins. They'll probably be in the maybe mid to high 70s. So these teams are all looking good, at least laterally, or could grow, right? And so, John, sum this up for us. What do you think is the conclusions based off of what we just talked about?
So let's review here. The Angels are probably going to need to get 89 wins. 89 seems like it's needed to even sniff a playoff spot. And in my opinion, Mike, I think 89 wins could actually win the AL West. It really depends on how much of a step forward the Rangers take. I could see them getting over 90 wins, but if you're the Angels or any of the other AL West teams taking wins away from the Rangers, that's going to have an impact there. So I think 89 to sniff a wild card or 89 to win the West is both viable. It's definitely going to be the minimum to get a wild card spot. And that's, like you said, a 26 win improvement. That's quite the jump. But this is a team that went 41-55 in the first half with the quote unquote good version of the Angels, which was the team they came into the season with. And then in the second half, they went 22-44 with the Jack Lopez, Johnny Cueto, Eric Wagaman version of the team, the version that traded guys away at the deadline and also lost some guys to injury. And Mike, that's the key. The first half team and the second half team. Why don't you break it down how the Angels performed against the AL West in the first half and the second half?
Yeah, these numbers are interesting, and I think could give you not false hope or hopium, but could actually give you some hope for this team being a whole lot better than they were, especially the latter half of last year. So against the Astros in the first half, John, the Angels were 3-3, which was very good and very impressive. Second half, they were 1-6. Against the Rangers in the first half, 3-3. Second half, 1-6, right? Against the A's, 3-3 first half. Second half, 2-5. And then the first half against the Mariners, 3-4. And then the second half, the worst version of the Angels, pause.
Yeah.
We're 5-1 against the Mariners. So go ahead.
The Mariners.
That got you.
That's right.
Now, that's 21-31 against the AL West in 52 games, Johnny.
Right. Mike, you have said it since we started hosting this show. The Angels have to go at least 500, 26-26 against the AL West. And last year, they went 12-13 in the first half, but then they went 9-18 in the second half with the broken version of the team. And here's the thing, they have to pick up their wins against the rest of the league as well. And here's a very frustrating thing. These are teams that the Angels did well against last year. They went 3-3 against the Yankees, 2-2 against the Dodgers, 2-1 against the Mets, 3-0 against the Padres, and 4-3 against the Tigers. Mike, what do they all have in common, all those teams?
They were all playoff teams.
They were all playoff teams. Mike, that's a 14-9 record against all teams that were in the playoffs. These are the teams the Angels struggled against. The Twins, 1-5. The White Sox, 2-4. The Reds, they went 0-3. The Cards, they went 1-2. The Nats, they went 1-2. The Rays, they went 3-4. And then the Blue Jays, they went 0-7 against the Blue Jays. Mike, that's an 8-27 record, 35 total games against teams the Angels should be beating. So my question to you is, what's the path here? The wild card or the AL West? You know, there's that old adage of you win 60, you lose 60. It's what you do with the other 42 that gets you in the playoffs. So between the two paths and the 42 remaining games, what do the Angels need to do in those 42 other games?
They're going to play against the West more than they're going to play against anybody else. And so I think the most viable option for the Halos is going to be in the AL West, especially if the cap is 89 wins. 89 wins is a wild card. It's a lot of wins for that third wild card spot. Not a lot of wins for a team that's winning the division. And so I think that that's the path. And those 42 games are going to be against those teams that the Angels need to beat that they didn't beat. And I think that that's where they can make up those games. I mean, gosh, John, if they went 8-27 against teams that were not very good last year, that's awful. And then they rose to the occasion against teams that were very good. If they could just go 500 in the AL West and go 500 against really bad teams, their record looks completely different if they do that this season. So I think that the best viable path for the Halos is going to be in the AL West, which means that you have to at least go 500 against these teams. You can't let them get the best of you. You're going to have to probably dominate a couple of teams, like an 8-5 against the Mariners. I think that that's important. You're going to have to reverse the record against the A's. You're going to have to reverse the record against the Rangers and the Astros. Even if you just finish 500 against those teams, that gives you a really good shot. So, John, my guess would be if the Halos are going to make the playoffs, I think the best route is going to be via the AL West.
Yeah, you look at the first half and how they performed against the AL West, going 500 against all the other teams, except for, 3-4 against the Mariners, but they did make up for that in the second half by going 5-1. So again, it's how you start, right? Like you got to start and have a good baseline, but at the end of the season, you don't know the different factors that are going to come into play. And that's true for the Angels too. Health, pitching, all that stuff. Anything can happen throughout the season. And so we might not see some of these teams come into the season and finish it the way that they came in. They might all look very different. And so that's kind of the key here is you got to beat the West. You have to be able to compete within your division. Mike, I think I'm with you. I think the most viable path, the most realistic, even though it's quite a reach, what makes more sense for the Angels is going down the AL West route.
Let's get to some other questions on Fanmail Friday. John, Ken Curtis on YouTube. That's a great baseball name, right?
Ken Curtis.
Now batting, Ken Curtis. He asked this question. If Moncada continues to struggle, would the Angels seek a trade for Arenado? What do you think?
Yeah, when we talked about this over the offseason, we discussed Nolan Arenado because he came up on MLB Network. Harold Reynolds, Matt Vasgersian talked about, hey, he should go with the Angels. If the Angels could, should, and would. And we came up with a couple of issues, Mike. The first is that they'd have to take on a luxury tax salary of $25.5 million. That would put them over the luxury tax at this point. The Cards are seeking controllable young players. So trading a low-cost, highly controlled player isn't going to get them under the LT because they're so cheap. It's not going to reduce their luxury tax salary. Plus, the Angels aren't in a position to trade away players like that right now anyway. So that's kind of what we discussed previously. But there's another issue we noticed with Arenado, isn't there, Mike?
Yeah, when we were discussing players that the Angels could go after during the offseason, we often heard, no, that player's regressing. You can't do that. Like Pete Alonso was a good example of people saying that. But let's be very clear about something. The definition of regression is not having a bad season or a down year.
Right.
Regression is when the skills and the underlying metrics start to decline as players get a bit older. I just want you to know we're setting you up, friends. We're setting you up. All right. So, and Arenado is a very good example of this, John, of actual regression. Why don't you tell us why?
Yeah, here's why. His exit velocity, his max exit velocity, and his hard hit percentage have all fallen year over year. His average exit velo in 2021 was 89 miles an hour off the bat. Now it's sitting at 86.3 in 2024. That's 9th percentile of all players. The maximum exit velo, so the hardest he's hit it all season, in 2022, he had one that was 111.4 miles per hour. In 2024, it was 107.5. Mike, his hard hit percentage has fallen year over year too. Just 4 years ago, it was 37.5% of the time he had a hard hit ball. Last year, 31.6%. And that's a steady decline year over year over year. So what does that mean? Well, it means he's not as strong as he used to be when he was younger. I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind. Barrel rate, Mike, is another thing that we want to look at in terms of regression. Remember, a barrel is the perfect combination of launch angle and exit velocity. And Arenado's barrel rate has fallen over the years. In 2022, he had an 8.2% barrel rate. Last year, it was 3.2. So that means the strength and the bat to ball skills are declining. It's not about numbers. It's not about like, oh, he had 40 home runs last year, and now he's got 26. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the actual metrics that measure how strong a guy is, or something a little bit easier to understand, Mike, the sprint speed, right?
Yeah. Nolan has never been the fastest in the league, but his sprint speed has really fallen off, John. Was in the 22nd percentile in 2022. Now he's in the 9th percentile in 2024. He's slowing down as he gets older. Arenado is the definition of regression, losing strength, batting skills, and speed year over year. Now, by the way, we did have somebody that asked about Anthony Rizzo and wanted to know if the Angels should get him. And so it turns out the same things apply to Anthony Rizzo. He's declining in all of the ways that Arenado is declining. And it's too bad that this data wasn't available in like 2015 when StatCast first came out, because it would have been easy to see that Josh Hamilton was showing signs of regression when he signed with the Angels in 2013.
Absolutely.
So those are major reasons why they should not go after Nolan Arenado and make that trade, or get somebody like an Anthony Rizzo. Now, if you bring him in to be a veteran leader, that might be a different conversation, but the guy is not going to perform offensively for you because his numbers have really regressed.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not the counting stats. It's not batting average. It's not number of home runs, that sort of thing. It's all the metrics that measure how strong you are, how good your bat to ball skills are, all of that stuff. That's the difference between a bad year and actual regression. Mike, Glenn Thomas on YouTube said, wouldn't it be cool if the Angels hired Albert Pujols as the manager in 2026 and have Vladdy Guerrero Sr. as one of the coaches? It might attract Vladdy Jr. and other Dominican players. The Dodgers have their Japanese connection and presence, so can't the Angels have a Dominican connection and presence? What do you say?
That's interesting. I think that the question about who's going to be the manager for this team in the future, I think it's going to be answered in that they're going to probably extend Wash one more year. I think they're going to give him an extension of some length, at least one more year. I don't think that they're going to be done with him at the end of this year unless he wants to be done.
Right.
And so I don't think that this conversation is going to be one that will be had until maybe 2027 after the 26 season. But the idea of representing the Dominican Republic and having Dominican players come here. I love that idea. And Dominican players are very talented, including Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Would love to have that guy on the Angels roster.
Yeah. Kurt on YouTube said, who do you guys think will be our bench players this year? And he said, go Halos. Mike, by my count, we've got 5 people in the rotation, 8 bullpen pieces, 5 outfielders, and 6 in the infield, including the 2 catchers, Ohapi and d'Arnaud. So that leaves 2 spots, while Zach Neto will likely go on the 10-day injured list. Where do the Halos have a need, and who fills them? Do you think that they should add a 9th bullpen arm? Should they add a couple guys in the infield? What do you say?
Now, if I'm understanding this right, they can't add a non-roster guy without having like a guy on the 60-day IL, right?
Yeah, they would have to move Neto to the 60-day, which they won't do because
so they're not going to do that. So it has to be somebody that's on the roster.
I think 40-man, yeah.
I think that you're right in that Kyron Paris is going to be somebody that they keep. And then my gut says that they're probably going to go with another bullpen arm. They're going to have somebody extra in the bullpen to start the season. Or maybe, John, maybe it's Jack Kahanowitz, and they have 6 starters, and they, because of days off, they rotate them in and out and give them a longer day off or a longer time between starts. I think they're going to go with a Kyron Paris, and I think they're going to go with maybe an arm to help solidify this starting rotation, or maybe somebody that can do long relief or be in there to help alleviate some of the stress as the season starts.
It's a good point about the bullpen, because if I have it right, it looks like 4 lefties and 4 righties. That's a lot of lefties for a bullpen. So to add another righty to that, even if it is somebody like Kohanowitz, who, would be a long relief guy, or we would want to see him in the rotation, that would make for an interesting case. So right now, adding a bullpen arm, I like that. I like adding Kyron Paris. Mike, I could see Tim Anderson getting a spot and then DFAing somebody.
Jose Suarez.
40-man. Yeah, there you go. It's going to be Jose Suarez, right? We're just going to keep on rooting for that one.
Hey, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB with our buddy Sully. You can find his show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, be sure you give us a follow on Twitter at Locked On Angels and at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. Whether you're watching or listening, come on over to today's show, get in the comments section on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, help us get to 10K by opening day. We'd love for you to subscribe. Even if you're an audio listener, that would really help us out. Mike, what do we have on deck for Monday's show?
We're watching all the games this weekend. We're going to bring you a detailed report. We're going to put our name and our student number at the top, and we're going to have a great, detailed, specific, clean report for you on Monday on Locked On Angels.
What'd you put for the first one? Mike Frisch. All right, friends. Thanks for being here with us. Until then, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
All right. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here on Monday.
Do you get your palms sweaty when you talk about like going back to school?
I still have dreams that I didn't go to a class that I signed up for in college.